committee chamber and to everyone joining us from home. This is an incredibly solemn day in our nation's history, and I would like to start and mark it with a moment of silence and observation of those whose lives were taken from them and those who have lost family members. Thank you. And I thank our NTA partners for agreeing to do that moment of silence for me, or for us. So this is the Newton School Committee's first meeting that has been open for in-person attendance in over 3 years. It's, yeah, that certainly deserves something. It's wonderful to see all of you tonight in the committee chamber. It's, I see many familiar faces from our wonderful educators, and I know that all of you had an engaging rally out in the hallway, and I thank you for your advocacy. I'll pause here while some friends file in. Ladies and gentlemen, as you file in, if you could remember that the meeting has already started, and we maintain strict order, please. Have gavel, will use it.
Sorry about that.
Yeah. In a minute. I think some folks are still coming in. Members of the staff and members of the public who are attending, we have a reserve overflow room in room 111 of this building, right down the hall and down the stairs. I invite anyone who doesn't have a seat to please view the meeting there if you'd like. Again, I will pause as we're still filing in for a moment more. Far away? Oh, okay. So anyone who doesn't have a seat, again, we have reserve overflow capacity in room 111. And I invite those of you who would like to have a seat and remain to remotely watch the meeting, room 111, right down the hall and down the stairs. Okay, we're going to start. So I thank you for being here. I appreciate your presence. I want all of the educators in the room to know that we are very pleased to have you joining us tonight, and that we know that your rally outside has been engaging, and that you are advocating hard for a settlement of a fair contract. Each member of this committee and the NPS administrative staff wants that for you as well. We stand in appreciation for your dedication to the students and the families of this district, and we know how remarkable you are in the work that you do. This is without fail, without question, 100% absolutely. So I wanted to make that clear at the top of our meeting, and right now we will jump into our meeting agenda with our scheduled public comment. Public comment is a period reserved. Sorry, I'm going to adjust this. Is that better? Okay. So public comment is reserved for members of the public to address the school committee and for the committee members to hear directly your concerns and perspective. We do not respond in this context, but we will listen and seriously consider your feedback. Each of us is also available by phone or email if you wish to have a conversation. All right, so I'm going to start tonight a little differently because we have both remote speakers and in-person speakers who've signed up on a posted sign-up sheet. The remote speakers, please make sure that your name is as it was when you signed up for public comment. And for those who are in the room, you will be invited to sit here at the lectern, the table with the microphone, and give your public comment. Each speaker will have up to 3 minutes to share your concern with the committee. For in-person commenters, again, you will be able to come to the microphone and share with us your concerns. We will give you a 30-second verbal warning before your time expires. And our first public commenter is Susan Cohen.
Chairs. Okay.
Susan, before you begin, can I just remind our audience to make this very seamless and efficient so that each person signed up can have their allotment of time to speak? Let's keep to a minimum of applause. And by that, we all know the coda, and that's fine, but let's make sure we're holding our applause. Thank you. Go ahead. Please state your name and address.
Good evening. My name is Susan Cohen, 124 Mount Vernon Street. Thank you for this opportunity to share my thoughts pertaining to the NTA's proposal for a minimum of 1 social worker per building. NPS's social emotional learning goal, posted on the NBS website, is to enhance student learning, engagement, and well-being by addressing the whole child with culturally responsive mental health services and supports for all learners. No argument with this goal. It's great. However, what concerns me is that while these well-intentioned words have been committed to in writing, I am not convinced that NPS is committed to this goal with real-time actions. So I do have a question, but would like to preface it with some background information from the 2021 government report written by Dr. Miguel Cardona, U.S. Secretary of Education, and Catherine Neese, Acting Assistant Secretary, regarding student mental health needs. Let's begin with the introduction, page 6. I quote, "The mental health crisis for children and youth has reached a critical point. The pandemic has exacerbated already alarming trends in mental health, and without increasing the number of mental health services, the increased need for services for children and youth will not be met. Schools have new resources in the ARP-ESSER funds to provide mental health supports, including dramatically increasing social workers, school counselors, school nurses, and school psychologists. The report continues to emphasize that the recommended ratio for both social workers and guidance counselors to students is 1 to 250. Only 2 Mass districts come close to meeting this ratio. Newton is not one of them. In reality, some NPS social workers are servicing 2 schools. This is a major disservice for the students and families who rely on the social worker for support and guidance. Going back to NPS's social emotional well-being goal, this could mean in some schools that these mental health services for all learners and their families will in reality only be available for some students and their families on 2.5 days because a social worker has to be at another school for half the week. Of course, this all costs money, along with the concern that adding positions such as social workers requires funds to sustain these positions. Well, you are in luck because on page 32 of the report, there are suggested funding options for increasing and sustaining mental health supports. A number of specific recommendations are listed. By the way, reinstating the KESPs would also go a long way to support the social and emotional wellness of our early learners. As underscored in this report on page 34, and I quote, "Schools will continue to contend with significantly elevated student social, emotional, and behavioral concerns. Funds provided from ARP-ESSER can be used to hire additional mental health staff, such as social workers, to meet the growing needs of students." So here is my question. How much of the federal funds, or any funds, have been used or will be used by the city to hire additional mental health staff to help NPS move closer to reaching their social emotional well-being goal? I look forward to a response. You are welcome to use my school email. Thank you.
Thank you, Sue. Folks, so one more reminder to please hold your applause. We have several folks signed up to speak tonight, many of whom are in this room and hoping to be called on. We won't be able to get through everyone on the list if I have to pause for reminders. All right, we're going to move on to our next in-person speaker. That is Fran Ramatella. I hope. Rametta. You will correct me. Thank you.
My name is Fran Rametta. I live at 4 Taylor Street in Needham, Mass. Thanks for the opportunity to be able to speak to you all tonight. I began teaching in Newton 30 years ago. In those days, Newton was a premier school district in which teachers were respected and valued. I felt proud to be part of such a progressive system. that was known for its excellence and inclusivity. Fast forward to today. We've weathered an historic pandemic that drastically changed our reality. The past few years have been challenging in many ways, and the effects of the pandemic continually reverberate throughout our system. Children have suffered socially, emotionally, and academically. Teachers pivoted on a dime to teach in a completely different way so we could continue to care for and teach Newton's children. 2020 and 2021 were very scary times for us. We were expected to be back in classrooms not knowing if people would die. I know my biggest fear was potentially losing a student to COVID. How could I possibly console the other children? How does one deal with that? And here we are now in 2023. Although the pandemic is officially over, it seems that life has changed permanently for the worse. And here we are in another contract year. The stance that the administration and school committee have taken against the teachers' fears feels eerily similar to the stressful uncertainty of the pandemic. It is shocking that after all of the commitment and dedication the teachers consistently demonstrate to the children of Newton, that the school committee would treat us in such a disrespectful and ugly way. Your attack on teachers is unprecedented, very public, and shameful. The damage you are causing will no doubt be longer lasting than that of the pandemic. Using a false narrative to pit parents against teachers is abominable. The distrust that you are propagating in an inflammatory way is poisoning our current environment and is already deterring young, talented teachers from wanting to teach in Newton. There is time for you to turn things around. It is time to stop the gaslighting and creating the divisiveness that is poisoning Newton schools. Give Newton teachers a fair cost of living increase and provide students the mental health supports they need. You can and you should do better for the children of Newton.
Our next public commenter, will turn now to one of our remote requests, Janet Sturman, followed by...
I don't see Janet. Do you want to pull Emily next?
Who do you have, Stephen? And where are you, by the way?
Oh, I'm in my office.
Oh.
Voice from above.
Who do you see on the list
Lauren
ready
are
to
here,
go?
but Janet's not.
What's that, Stephen?
So Emily is here. Loring is here. Janet.
All right, Emily and followed by Loring, and then we'll go back to in-person. Thank you.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay. My name is Emma Stevo and I teach third grade at Countryside School. I work with a beautiful human who's been dedicated to her work in Newton going on 10 years now. She's a Unit C employee who goes above and beyond in her work, despite the fact that she needs to work 2 jobs year-round in order to feed herself and her 2 children. With the cost of the recent insurance switch, and regardless of the extra stipended work she does to move our district forward on SEL and DEI initiatives, she's taking home $1,800 per check. That's $3,600 a month. The average rent in Newton is $3,520. My third graders would tell you that math doesn't work out. There's not money for food, clothing, or any kind of self-care, which teachers need. She therefore does not live in Newton, but the average rent in her Boston neighborhood is $2,133. That leaves her with about $1,450 per month to make sure she and her kids can get to school and eat. She has to forget about anything beyond that. And that's not even including the fact that she isn't paid over the summer. Colleagues are constantly asking her when she'll get her master's in order to take the next step at work because she is phenomenal at what she does. They don't realize all the work she's doing to simply break even, let alone have the funds and the time to get another degree. Newton has tucked a strong game in the way of closing gaps and promoting diversity, equity, and inclusion. if Newton is actually serious about walking the walk on DEI, and if we want to hire and retain staff of color, we need to make sure this is a district where folks can afford to work and advance in their career. Right now, many of our staff of color are Unit C employees, just like my friend, and they're being held back from being able to do just that, let alone being able to simply feed their family. Please remember that these are people's lives you are dealing with, and that those people are giving their all every day to provide the education folks move to Newton to give for their children. Thank you.
Thank you, Emily. Our next remote public commenter is Loring Masters. Loring, please state your name and
Thank you.
address, and you may begin.
I'm Loring Masters. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
All right. I'm the social emotional learning interventionist at Bowen Elementary School, and this is my 7th year at Newton Public Schools. I signed on tonight in solidarity with every educator in the district, but specifically to use my time to advocate for Unit C. Though perhaps we'd be more appropriately named Unit Unseen, because when we excel, our students shine in the spotlight and we fade from the scene with intention. Unit Unseen because the dismissiveness and classism that has saturated conversations about our compensation makes obvious how little our contributions are valued and how vastly our worth is underestimated. Unit Unseen because so many of us, like myself, grew up neurodiverse and show up to be the grown-ups we needed as kids so we could learn to love ourselves instead of mask ourselves. Unit Unseen because we're the most racially diverse group in the NTA, and that needs to stay front and center in the conversation unless it's equity and excellence with a little asterisk. If we're so easily replaced with our current rates of pay, our positions would be fully staffed, which they never are. And in the event of attrition, there'd be resumes ready on the administrators' desks. In truth, not one school in the city could open its doors for an hour without us. We're the backbone of fair access to public education, not the helm. Unit Unseen because instead of hearing about our worth, we suffer secular conversations about how Newton will possibly foot the bill, but we know better than anybody that without us, it's our most intersectionally marginalized students that pay the price. Inflation is a real thing that exists. We were already living paycheck to paycheck, but now we're the living embodiment of that meme where a person is drowning and a hand reaches out to give us a high five. We can't live like this. We can't work like this. Do the right thing and pay us like you see us. Thank you.
Our next public commenter is someone in the school committee room. We will go to Allison LeBron. And Stephen, if you're listening, so let me know who you've queued up after Allison's finished, please.
My name is Allison Lobron. I live at 83 Fairway Drive. Thank you for allowing me to speak today. Members of the school committee, I spoke with several of you this summer. You shared with me genuine discomfort over having to cut staff positions both last year and the year before. You shared the belief that the school committee is now faced with a choice. Either you give the NTA a reasonable contract now or maintain the current level of staffing for next year. I think everyone here knows that there is a third option. The City of Newton has $40 million in free cash. None of it is going to NPS next year, and very little for the years after that. The NTA is making reasonable demands. Please, Mayor Fuller, if you're listening, stop underfunding our schools and give our teachers the contract they deserve. I'd like to address the rest of my remarks to the teachers in the room, in the hall, and on Zoom. Please continue to advocate for a fair contract. You are advocating for properly staffed classrooms, mental health support, and adequate planning time so you can do your best work with our children. Please continue to advocate for a reasonable COLA that is in line with every other district in our area. It is outrageous that in a wealthy city like Newton, we are trying to close budget gaps by shortchanging you, our most valuable resource. Finally, and not to put too much pressure on you, our country needs today's public school teachers to fight for better wages and better working conditions. In a recent survey, only 18% of respondents said that they would, quote, encourage a young person to become a K-12 teacher. As a former public school teacher myself, I implore you to keep fighting for our profession. The work you are doing is essential for the future of our country. We can't let short-sighted city officials continue to squeeze the lifeblood out of our nation's educators. What you do is too important. Thank you.
Our next in-person public speaker will be Janet Sturman, or I'm sorry, Jo Louise Allen. Janet Sturman, will throw it to you in a moment after Jo Louise.
Coming home after 4 years of not being here. Hi, my name is Jo Louise Allen. I live at 24 Indiana Terrace, and I agree with everything that everyone has said so far, and I'm just going to give you a little bit of a break from contract negotiations to speak about the disability awareness inclusion curriculum that's being worked on or proposed. I really just want you guys to stop playing games and be straight with us. The Understanding Our Differences program was not removed for any kind of budget reason. $32,000 out of a $4 million budget is just pennies in a bucket. The Understanding Our Differences program was removed because there seems to have been a sea change in Newton. There's, it says in this note that you're going to hear a report later tonight from Casey Nago-Miller and Anna Nolan saying that the budget deficit last spring required central staff to examine all expenditures, including the cost of having the UOD program at our elementary schools. The budgeting process presented an opportunity to review services and programs, this is a very poor decision, and this program is like the lifeblood of the Newton Public Schools. It has been around for 45 years, and of course, there are units that need to be upgraded. There are units that need to be modified. There is material that is outdated, that needs to be corrected. But to take this program and to just rename the line item, it's gone, is really criminal. There's a letter I'm just going to try to see if I can read to you a few sentences from. This letter was sent from Susan Albright, president of the City Council in Newton, to Kathleen Smith, who at the time interim superintendent. And some of the things that Susan wrote is, this is hardly the time to take our foot off the gas regarding the job of teaching our children to get along with and respect people who are different. We only need to think back a few years to a shameful action by a presidential candidate who made a joke out of a reporter with a disability to know that our work is not yet done. Susan goes on to commend the program. But she really says something very strongly that I did not hear Kathleen Smith respond to, and Anna, you've inherited it.
Louise, you have 30 seconds.
Okay. I don't know if you've had a chance to read this letter. I'm happy to put it in the packet. She says, another reason I have heard that the UOD is being removed is because the current school administration doesn't want parents involved in the curriculum. That is surprising, as this nationally recognized program has operated this way for over 40 years and has been wildly successful. We've also learned that the assistant superintendent also canceled this program in Brookline. Has she considered working with the leadership of UOD to change what she doesn't like? And as I have 5 seconds, basically Susan Albright spoke about her career before here, working at the Bureau of Developmental Disabilities, assistant director at the Department of Mental Health, and...
Sorry, Jo Louise, your time is up.
Okay.
Thank you, Jo
Well, I'll be
Louise. Thank
back
you very much.
In the next, in 2 weeks to tell you.
It was a
the same.
pleasure to see you again after all these years.
Nice to see you too, Tamika.
So our next remote public commenter will be Janet Sturman. Janet, please state your name and address, and you may begin. Oh, you're muted.
We go. Okay. I'm just figuring this out. I'm doing it on my phone, and I'm usually in front of my computer, so I'll cut this short. First of all, I just want to say I appreciate the school committee staying the course and holding the line with the mediator and continuing the process as we've agreed to do with the teachers union. I am a little frustrated. There was a public meeting with the Newtonville Area Council a couple weeks ago where Mr. Zillis came and made his play in the court of public opinion to get parents and taxpayers to come out and cry out for the teachers union. And I don't think we are unfair to the teachers, and I hate hearing the term, we have to give a fair contract. I believe we are fair. It's unfortunate that's the terminology being used, but frankly, I'm putting my faith in the professionals and the people that we elected to represent us, that being you on the school committee, to work this out fairly with both sides. I mean, we've got limited funds. We did not pass an override, and to expect more money than we have for incoming from taxes to pay to teachers, it's not that we don't respect our teachers. I think we do. I think they're the key to the future of our country. But on the same token, to say that we're not being fair with them is just not right. So keep doing what you're doing in the school committee, and that's all I can say. Thank you. All right.
Thank you, Janet. Our next public commenter will be an in-person public comment by George White. George? And everyone, may I remind you to be respectful in your conduct as folks are speaking?
Good evening.
Good evening. Go ahead. Please start.
Yeah, okay. Testing. Good. All right. George Abbott White. I taught at Meadowbrook Junior High, Bigelow Junior High, and Newton South High School for 42 years. I have been retired. It's a dozen years, and I've been in touch with colleagues. I think I came down here this evening because, besides to see my friends, the custodians, I've been dismayed that this is, you know, kind of a record that's playing and playing and playing. And what I wanted to do is say that there are a lot of people who are like me, that is, they're retired, and they put in a lot of time, and they care a lot about the kids they worked with. So I just want to remind you about a few of them that I had, and maybe this might give people some ideas about how to scuffle up some scratch. The New York Times, the Washington Post, the New Yorker, the Boston Globe, National Public Radio, all my students. Yeah? My plumber, this is the A team I'm going to give you now. My plumber, my electrician, my auto mechanic, my banker, my CPA. All Newton kids, they're my students. I'm going to leave out Matt Malone because I think that would be just, doing too much. Well, all right, Matt. And I'm going to leave out those people that you guys watch on Netflix. Okay. I'm not going to leave out the resident that I had lunch with last week. He and two of his Newton South colleagues are at Children's this year. And so the list could go on and on. I think you get my point. And what is the addition to that point? Many others helped them, family and friends. But did their teachers not help them that much? These stalled negotiations, and some of my younger colleagues here would seem to say that they don't feel like they matter very much.
Virtue of 30 seconds.
It's always that way, isn't it? So I think that rather than in having sort of dismaying meetings, that all of you who are sitting here and were elected, I think you have tremendous skills. And I would suggest that you direct them towards scuffling up some scratch. Let the teachers teach, okay? And the best support that you can give them, give them the dough. Good evening.
Thank you very much. Our next. So, folks, we can stretch and accommodate 2 more public comment requests. We have actually met our 30 minutes reserved for public comment. I'm going to stretch. I did ask for that moment of silence, which took up some time. So we have two final speakers tonight. The first is an in-person speaker, Tina Fischella. Again, please hold your applause so that we can move quickly through our speakers. Thank you.
I'm Tina Fasella. I live at 155 Dorset Road in Newton. I'm a resident, a parent, and I've been teaching in the schools for 18 years. In my new capacity as a contract action team captain, I have regular meetings with colleagues across the city, and we talk. You've done talking about the lack of funds available to settle a fair contract for teachers. Since cost is your main bargaining point, I'd like to make you aware of some hidden costs you're probably unaware of. First is the cost involved in eroding public trust in the committee with your inflammatory, fear-mongering emails to Newton families. That you hope to stoke a public panic about a non-existent September work stoppage was painfully obvious and hopefully a failure. Creating an environment of fear is bad for students. The next cost involves pitting our new superintendent, someone with whom we are excited to work with, having heard wonderful things about from Natick, against her educators in a way that is eroding trust at the very juncture she is trying to build it. Of a more day-to-day tangible cost is the wedge you're trying to drive between building administrators and the educators they lead. That's bad for students too. The last cost is perhaps the worst. In the talks I have with educators across the city, morale is very low. Lower than previous contract cycles, lower than even during the COVID crisis. I'm hearing veteran teachers, people who got into teaching out of a love for children and a passion for the craft of educating them, calculating how many more of these demeaning contract cycles they have to endure before retiring. I'm hearing young teachers loudly questioning why they should stay in a city where the mayor and the school committee, for all their pretty words of appreciation, don't value them enough to offer a fair contract. And they are already leaving. Replacing them is getting harder and harder.
Tina, you have 30 seconds.
Newton is not immune to the national teacher shortage crisis. A demoralized teaching staff is bad for students. These costs are adding up with every day we work without a fair contract. And if the unthinkable happens and you secure your current offer on the table as a contract, these costs will become a permanent drag on the Newton Public Schools. And I'm not sure how we come back from that. But it isn't too late. You know the money is there. The city councilors know the money is there. I'm here to implore you to show us some respect and fight for us the way we fight for our students.
Thank you, Tina. Unfortunately, we only have time for one last public commenter. We will go to a remote commenter. Stephen, I thank you for catching the message. We'll go to Robert Conran.
He's coming in.
Okay, I've unmuted. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can hear you. Please begin.
All right, thank you. Yes, I'm Bob Conran. I teach sixth grade math as a general ed teacher at Day Middle School. While I have many concerns right now, my primary concern that I want to express tonight is that there are insufficient numbers of support staff and insufficient support of those support staff. If the school committee and the mayor were to consider adding funds to the school budget, This is one area that deserves particular attention. Last year was my most difficult year teaching. The learning gaps where they're greatest from my experience. Teaching during COVID certainly added challenge, but with what we encountered since returning to school full time, my work is far more complicated. I have students who learn math outside of school and enter sixth grade knowing eighth grade math, such as the Pythagorean theorem. But after COVID, there are too many students entering sixth grade with limited understanding of many of the fifth grade concepts that they used to bring to school at the start of the school year. I spent last year, as I did the year before, trying to help these kids catch up. I spend 80% of my time on 20% of the kids, but every kid deserves my attention, and it's become more and more and more difficult. And it's with the support staff that can help me the most, in my opinion. I don't blame the fifth grade teachers. They're also trying to catch up their students. As we came out of COVID, we had a full-time math intervention teacher who worked wonders. Many students graduated out of her program during the school year, but from what I could estimate, she could only help 3 to 4% of the 900 or so students a day. Last year, the position was cut in half. Yet, as a general ed teacher, the numbers of students needing support that I had to provide only grew. My largest class last year had 21 students. My largest class this year has 24 students. I have more students on IEPs. I have ELL students who've been added and just add some complexity to what I need to cover and to be able to teach all the students. With more support for our support staff, with more math intervention teachers and others, I think it would greatly benefit all the students in every classroom as I, as a general ed teacher, would be able to support more of the kids and to reduce so much of my attention on these few. Last year was the kids, there was a lot of fighting going on.
Thank you, Robert. Your time has expired. We very much
Thank you.
appreciate hearing from you. And with that, our public comment period has closed. I apologize to anyone who wasn't able to speak tonight. We did have 10 speakers, and again, you will be free to submit your comments to the school committee at your leisure. Educators, we have to prepare for class tomorrow morning. Thank you very much. We will let our guests file out, and then we'll proceed to our consent agenda. Let's take a moment to let them file out. Thank you. Again, I thank the folks who gave us public comment tonight. We deeply appreciate hearing their perspective. The public comment is officially now closed, and we will turn to our consent agenda. Here we have 5 items on the consent agenda. They are approval of the appointment of retired Newton South High School Dean Charles Mayette to serve as the school attendance officer in accordance with attendance procedures as required by Mass law, an approval of the revised policy EFD, a change in collection of payment for school meals, the FY24 grant awards as detailed in the memo by Amy Mistro, our Director of Business Operations, approval of those grants, approval of the donation of a car as detailed in the memo from Kathleen Duff, Director of Career and Technical Education, with our thanks to John Hazard Connor for this generous gift. And finally, approval of the FY24, FY23 minutes from, and this is a lot, thank you, Lisa, March 28th, April 3rd, April 6th, April 12th, April 25th, April 27th, May 8th, May 22nd, June 12th, June 20th, June 21st, the retreat, June 21st, the meeting, July 25th, the retreat, and July 25th, the meeting. One small correction shared by Lisa was that Paul was present, not absent, on the April 3rd meeting minutes. So with that small correction, just want to bring that to your attention. Does anyone wish to remove an item from the consent agenda? And here I have one item. Any others? Okay, so the approval of the revised policy EFD, that it would be a first read, and in accordance with our own practice, we should have a first read tonight and a vote at our subsequent meeting on the 27th. So I'd like to pull that from the consent agenda, and we'll consider it as a first read, and if you have any questions, we can talk about that. But we do have a rather substantial detailed memo. So is there a motion to accept the remaining items on the consent agenda?
I move we accept the remaining items on the consent agenda
Is with that small correction,
with the small correction of the,
April 3rd.
yes, April 3rd, being included in the changes to the minutes.
Thank you, Emily. Is there a second? Go ahead, Rajiv.
A second.
Thank you, Rajiv. So we have a motion and a second. We'll do a quick roll call vote. Ward 1,
Yes.
Ward 2,
Yes.
Ward 3,
Yes.
Ward 4, yes, Ward 5.
Yes.
Ward 6 is not present at the moment. Ward 7, also not present. Ward 8,
Yes.
and Mayor Fuller.
Yes.
Thank you, everybody. Go ahead, Hannah.
Hi, everyone. Just wanted to introduce to you the gentleman online who is the newly appointed attendance officer. This is Charles Mayette. I just wanted to give him his due and also have the community know who this is should they ever come into interaction with this gentleman. Hello, it's nice to meet you, and I wondered if you just wanted to say hello to the community.
Thank you, Dr. Nolan. Yes, good evening, everybody. I'm looking forward to staying in with the Newton Public Schools and helping kids get to school and work with parents and work with administrators throughout the district. So I'm very happy to be able to introduce myself to everybody tonight and want to say thank you.
Charles Mayette is the now retired Newton South High School Dean, in case anybody needs to know. So welcome to your new role.
Thank you, Charles. I was wondering who the gentleman was who was on the screens. All right, so the item that I wanted to pull, the, where was it now? Approval of the revised policy EFD. Does anyone have any questions? I believe Amy Mistro's there, but Anna's here. Well, no questions? Okay, so again, we're taking this as our first read. You have the memo from Amy, and we'll put it back in the consent agenda in the next meeting. Okay. Now we'll turn to our superintendent update. Anna?
Good evening, everyone, and everyone at home. It is my pleasure to have my second school committee meeting here in Newton, and also to kick off the school year. which, while fraught with some interesting developments, also had some excellent beginnings. In the memo before you as a school committee, and certainly available to the public, there's an overview of happenings through the summer, and I just wanted folks to know what was going on and what's operating over the summer, in addition to starting school. Just some highlights that I think the average Newton family would be interested to know. So first, there were a total of 3,000 students served by the NATIC Community Education program within our school buildings, 1,896 students served by summer school services at a variety of programs, extended year services, and the Calculus Project, in addition to Space Camp and other enrichment and summer success programs. And this is certainly a credit to the dedication of our educators who continue to serve students despite what I would also consider a very grueling year last year in our profession. I do want you to know that our new Human Resources Director, Dr. Giovanni Santa, is here tonight, and she'll be speaking to you briefly, but we wanted you to know from the Human Resources Department that as of 9/5, 13 positions still remained open in the Newton Public Schools, and we're still, 5 of them are in process for hiring now, and a couple are in the queue with fingerprinting and Corey checking and that kind of thing. Certainly we're in a different landscape than we were last year, but still very challenging. Application counts, though, have been quite high for many positions in Newton. To the previous speaker's point, however, as with all of the Tri-County superintendents discussing a lack of paraprofessional applicants, so that is a real crisis for the profession. Also being tracked, we are the diversity of our candidates, and we're starting in earnest very detailed exit interviews so that we can work in concert with the NTA to address those types of issues that might be getting in the way of staff staying and coming to the Newton schools. So dashboards for human resources to come to track this regularly, and you'll hear from us regularly. In addition, we are working on an interview system for current staff, affectionately called stay interviews, because we want to know why people like to stay in the Newton Public Schools, and we'll work with our NTA colleagues to determine a time when that might be appropriate to send. Summer staff development. Of course, our core mission is the relationship between teachers and their students. And teachers were very hardworking this summer and took on professional development and training opportunities, which are listed in the memo, but they range from mathematics to social studies lessons that were piloted last year, becoming fine-tuned, working on secondary math alignment, and augmenting programs. You just heard about gaps that students have in certain subject areas. That requires teachers to create gap remediation programs and revised units, and our teachers are doing that. Our literacy equity project met this summer. Middle school health and wellness made updates to their curriculum and reviewed potential drafts to the state wellness frameworks. Also, there was substantial technology training, including addressing the use of artificial intelligence in our workplace and in the schooling of our students. There's actually a link to some of those trainings in the memo if the members of the public are interested in seeing the actual training slide decks. Elementary digital citizenship work was done, a partnership between instructional technology and our social emotional learning teachers. Leaders received training in our new literacy curriculum, which is called EL Education. We had keys to literacy training around instructional approach to literacy, culturally responsive teaching, and a summer instructional tech camp for educators. So it was a very busy summer, and we're very proud of the work that our educators did. On the other side of our organization, under operations and facilities, also busy. Maintenance was hard at work addressing a robust summer planned schedule. All custodians met for a full day of annual training, including training on recycling, sustainability, and efforts that we can make as school system to address our sustainability desires. We completed annual inspection of all our kilns in the city. I don't know if everyone knows, but it's pretty rare that every single school in our portfolio of schools has a kiln for art classes, which is just tremendous. Many projects for student services, including accessibility upgrades, 2 new lavatories, ADA accessible doors, curb cuts, ramp repairs, and replacement. We performed lavatory improvements at 13 locations, including new fixtures and flooring, and expanded to complete over 350 preventative maintenance work orders. We manage summer cleaning services while hosting all the camps and the thousands of children that we mentioned previously. 220 summer projects were completed in addition to the 350 general work orders. Ceiling and light upgrades were made to Day, Mason, Rice, and Ward, and continued site improvements in coordination with the Public Works. And, not small or unappreciated in the hot weather recently, 115 window shades ordered and installed at various schools. There is a breakdown of all the different types of work orders in the report with a pie chart. Just wanted you to know about the work of facilities. We also had a complete phone upgrade over the summer, as well as a transition to our newly executed and revised one-to-one program where 11th and 12th graders can opt to bring their own devices while we still refresh and deploy all the devices for the K-8 system, or K-10 system. The district has contracted with Boston College to create a research study to actually map the use of technology in our school system from K-12 and to bring that report back to us as a committee and to the community to understand the actual use of technology. This district, while not being one-to-one previously, was thrust into that in the pandemic. It's important to know how we're using that technology so that we can better support teachers, and we and you as a committee can make decisions about the future of the program and its sustainability. In addition, the study is unique in that it maps actually the health and wellness of teachers, their morale, and their health in relative to how they deploy technology and how they create technology experience for students in the classroom. This is an international data set. Newton will be added to that international data set, and Mr. Attendi and I, our Director of Technology, were very excited to contract that research work. There's no lifts for teachers or staff. It's just a study of what they're seeing in classrooms, and there are some survey and focus group opportunities should staff and students want to speak about that. I don't know if you've been up on the news in terms of cybersecurity awareness, but there's been quite a few school districts held hostage by cybersecurity incidents. Mr. Attendi and his staff are ahead of that, and through some grant funding and work within the district, a cybersecurity awareness training program has been created for the district, and that'll be a 21-hour training session for key staff in the district. There'll be phishing campaigns, and we'll test how good we are at resisting those cyber threats. I'm happy to report that $25,000 grant for pilots to manage student cell phone use at Day Middle School and Newton North High School has been deployed. It's important to talk about this in a little bit more detail. Day Middle School purchased for all students something called Yonder pouches, Y-O-N-D-R. I don't know why it's called a Yonder pouch, but it is a magnetized phone pouch that can only be opened with a magnet that is somewhere other than in the child's hands. And it allows the child to actually have the phone, so their property is safe, but they cannot use it during classes. And the teachers have been pretty positive about that so far. At North, there's a sort of, we call them the shoe garage type over the door, staff putting phones in there, and students can still see them, but they're not on their desks during the school class. I included for the public some of the training that has also accompanied those students who are in this pilot. If we find the results of this pilot successful, we will look to scale that across our schools so that teachers are not in the business of having to intervene around technology use, that type of technology use within the district, and that students can have the healthy social interactions that they so desperately need at this time. So we're looking forward to that. If you want to see the policy and see how it's operationalized, I also included the policy of what's being told to students about their phone use in the schools. Parents, I have heard you loud and clear about school lunch and your dissatisfaction with it over the recent years, and we have worked very hard with Whitson's, our current food service provider, to make changes. After extensive feedback from you, which I compiled, and Amy Mistro, who is on the call with us today, has been the lead in terms of sharing that with Whitson's. We are in the last year of our food service contract, so we would very much like to see the kind of improvements that we know Whitson's can deliver, because they have been showing us all summer with tastings of what they intend to do to improve things for the students. So I'm very excited and hope that we deliver on that, because students deserve tasty lunch, and so do our staff. I'm happy to tell you that we are fully hired for bus drivers for the Newton Public Schools. And usually the Labor Day weekend is that weekend where they slide away to other districts, and that did not occur so far. Of course, there are bumps at the beginning of the school year as routes are learned, as drivers determine whether they are indeed staying with the bus vendor and for driving van drivers. But so far, we've had much more success than previous years. Busing for athletics continues to be a challenge due to the late time of the school day conclusion for our high schools, market issues, and driver shortages for that time period. We've had many field project updates, updates to Newton South Lion Drive, which is formerly Brandeis Road, and stadium fields were completed this summer. The new surfaces have a lower temperature, which are significantly better than prior fields. They do not have the plastic-based crumble that contributes to some types of water and wetlands toxicity, and they have appropriate erosion controls if they're near wetlands. Just wanted to share that because they are state-of-the-art fields, and they're really impressive. There are grand reopening ceremonies for those south fields on September 18th at 5:15 at the fields if you're interested in joining us there. Finally, at Newton North, a light project has been completed as of this weekend. It was slightly delayed, therefore we could not use them for our first football game of the year. But it will be moving forward our pleasure to have those lights installed. Lights were rented for this past game to allow it to finish. Those are temporary, and all of the issues are now abated, and the lights are installed, so very exciting. Just a couple of updates coming everyone's way, that there are changes to the MCAS test. We just want to update families about this. DESE is piloting a required MCAS civics assessment for 8th graders this spring, and a percentage of our 8th graders, not all, at each of our middle schools will be required by the Department of Education to participate in these pilots and to test this material. DESE will reveal to us at some point their selection expectations for that. We do not have them at this time. The test is 2 parts, a performance task, which is different from the types of testing that we're doing now, which generally are multiple choice, and an open response writing prompt. So we have yet to see those performance tasks, but then an end of the course test, which is specifically testing civic standards in those grades. It's about 50 minutes each test. Both will be administered online in TestNav, which is the current MCAS program, and schools will be notified about which performance task topic they are assigned in October, and they will provide training for staff and on the performance tasks and student participation. You should know that some of our staff members are being recruited to work on the next assessment for MCAS and the next RFP, which is the call for proposals. And I'm really proud that we're being tapped to be on that influential committee to make sure that this experience is something good for students. In addition, all of our 5th graders and 8th graders were selected by the Department of Ed to participate in an expanded field test for science, technology, and engineering. It's in lieu of the regular testing, so this is not double testing for our young people, and it will not result in any additional testing time. Students will take 1 session of operational MCAS items within the STE test, which will be reported for achievement and to parents through the parent guardian report. There will be 1 session of field test performance tasks there as well. And I just want to say I'm very much in favor of a more performance task-based assessment, but I remain open to until I see the test about whether I actually think it's a good one. So I'm glad to have the pilot moment. Official MCAS results will come out from last spring's MCAS testing in late September, so we're working on deploying those to all the families now. And finally, just a word about attendance procedures. We met our attendance officer here at the top of the hour, and I want to just make sure that parents have read the recent communications about attendance, which is a tightening of our compliance with school committee and county expectations for attendance. They are not new policies for attendance, but they are now aligned attendance policies across the system, which also includes early notification to parents. So parents may receive more notice than they have before so that there's no surprises if a principal is calling and saying your child's been out 8 days. We're really following up on that. Attendance is critical so that students can continue to keep up with grade level material and should they need it to remediate any skills that they are missing. A detail was added to the high school attendance standards for courses, including on report cards if a student has met the attendance requirement for classes or not. So students have to be marked present, and there's specific criteria for what gets you marked present for a class. And in doing so, you get credit for that class, which honors the work of the teacher and ensures that the student is evaluated but has been in the class. So just want to make sure that people understand there's no new requirement. You were always expected to attend classes. Now we're just being very deliberate about how we communicate with families about it. I say all of that because I want to also say that our teachers and our administrators are full of empathy and care when there are those emergencies where students and families need to be out. But communicating early and often is necessary, and unfortunately, the county does not distinguish between a sick day at a certain point and a personal day or a vacation. So when you get to a certain number of days out, the state says they're all unexcused. So we're just complying with those expectations. We're happy to speak to anyone if they have confusions about that. And of course, if someone is ill, we want them to stay home and take care of themselves. And if you have some sort of medical documentation, that helps to ease the situation completely. So the full set of procedures has been sent to all families through email. They're also on our website, and they're included in tonight's materials. And that concludes my summer update. But thank you. I've been having a blast meeting with lots of families and educators, and I'm just so excited to continue to have the opportunity to work in Newton. So thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Anna. Any questions from the members or comments about something she shared in that update? No? Okay. I will tell you, I've heard a lot from my 8th grade day middle school twins about the yonder pouches and what they portend in the future.
I can't wait to hear.
It's grumpy complaints, but I think it's brilliant. I honestly do. As a parent, I think it's wonderful. So thank you. Oh, go ahead, Ping.
Just quick input, and I appreciate that they organized a group of parents. Supposedly we like to have the picnic at the Cove Park, wonderful, but that day was storming, was rain, was terrible, so we changed the location, and I very appreciate that. And Dr. Nolan and her husband came and during this storm, and we still have about 20 parents around, so I know you've been so busy the whole summer. I know you're involved in other gatherings, but I appreciate you all being there.
Wonderful, thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you. Go ahead, Emily.
Just two quick things. One is I'm glad that we are starting to follow attrition rates, and I'm looking forward to hearing more about that in the future. Give you some time to onboard. So that's number one. And the second is really, I guess, just a request or feedback, really for Stephen, which is at some point this year it would be good to understand how many of the 11th and 12th graders and that sort of optional who opted in and who, like, is that successfully working? So, thank you.
Good questions. All right. Well, thank you so much, Anna, for that update.
Sure.
And let's continue on. We have our first item on the agenda is a negotiations update, and here I will be giving the update on behalf of the negotiations subcommittee. Unfortunately, my colleagues, school committee members on the negotiations subcommittee couldn't be with us tonight, so I'm happy to do the update. You have the memo in front of you. Kathy helped prepare that, but I'm just going to give you some highlights, both contained in the negotiations update and just generally speaking where we are right now in our negotiations. As of September 1st, we are now officially out of contract with the NTA, our previous contract having just expired on August 31st. This is not an uncommon situation between school committees and their unions. It's neither uncommon for Newton, nor is it uncommon across the state. That there's operation for some time while a successor contract is being negotiated. So that's one of the main reasons why we started our negotiations early. meeting nearly a dozen times over the course of commencing last October. And I thank our NTA partners who our leadership team are in the room. We sat down, we were collaborative, we were meeting, and it came to a point where we just needed some help. And so, as provided in the memo distributed earlier today, we've had our first meeting with the negotiations team and our state-appointed mediator, that process of getting us some help to resolve the issues that we have yet to agree on tentatively or otherwise within our contract negotiations. So our mediator is a veteran with the DLR. He's highly skilled, and he's worked along many decades with school committees and their unions. We've had our first joint session. We will have our first joint session on Monday, September 18th, and we are looking forward to a productive process. So an updated FY 24-23 comparison salary chart by district is also included in the memo. And it confirms that Newton remains within the top 10 among comparable districts for our salaries. This analysis provides us with really helpful guidance as a negotiations team in our discussions for our successor contract. We are conducting those negotiations in good faith. We are trying very hard to reach a fair but also a sustainable contract with our NTA members. Unfortunately, last week, state law did require us to file a strike investigation because we had knowledge of facts that would implicate that a strike had occurred. Last week, the Department of Labor's Commonwealth Employment Relations Board conducted a hearing. We will know the results of that investigation in short order when we are notified in the next few days. I know that gave many people in our community, many parents, many educators themselves, a lot of concern, but it's our position that we, as required by law, have to flag something that gave us a reasonable inference that there may have been a work stoppage, a strike, as defined by law. The DLR is the independent body. It is their job, after investigation, to make a determination, and we will await that determination. That's it. That's pretty much everything I have for you. If you have any questions, I'm happy to respond. All right. Thank you. Let's move on. Up next, on my agenda, I have that we're joined by Joannie Sana. Are we still doing it? Okay, good. Joannie. She's our new HR Human Resources Director for the district. We are incredibly, yes, please. I mean, taking that chair for the first time, it's got gravitas. Anywho, we are incredibly pleased and honored to have you in that position, and welcome to Newton, officially, and the school committee.
Thank you. I feel very honored and very much welcomed here in Newton, both by the school committee members, and I've worked with some of you a little bit on negotiations or an executive session, and so I'm starting to get to know everyone. And my colleagues in central office have been amazing. I know it's always a heavy lift when there's a new person that comes onto the team. A lot of questions are asked and a lot of support. They don't gripe. They're pleased to help. They offer it before I even ask, which is amazing. It feels like I've worked here for a long time, and it's only been two and a half months. It's been a great entry. Thank you, Dr. Nolan, for helping that transition. And I'm energized and excited, and I feel it's a great place to work. It's a great place to be an educator and administrator. I do think we'll get through some of the speed bumps we're in right now. And even with that, there were quite a few people who were very warm even tonight when they came in. And so I think that that's a testament to the kind of community that Newton is and the kind of work educators are doing for children every day and for each other. I think that's really important. The entry plan that you see is super ambitious. I go over it a lot. I look to see if I need to make certain adjustments. I think when you're in education and in leadership, you really do have to have an ego big enough to feel like you can do anything, but not so big that you think you can do it by yourself, right? And so it's a super ambitious plan, but the Newton students and educators deserve it, their leaders do as well, and I'm doing my best to try to learn the district and learn where my skill set can bring added value.
So there's a 30, 60, 90-day plan before you, and Dr. Santa will come back before you with the results of that, just as I will come to you in the fall. So we're forever bonded in being new together here and doing our entry work together. So with that, if anyone has any questions.
Mayor Fuller and then Rajiv.
This is a fabulous entry plan. If to Dr. Nolan and to you, Joanne, am I saying it good?
Thank you.
You may have to help me in the future, though.
You're good.
If I can add one more, I don't know if it's 30, 60, or 90, but perhaps something like getting to know and create a collaborative work environment with the city HR partners, because I know how closely you're already working. And
Yes,
communicating.
we've reached out.
It's all
yes.
good.
Yes. I can put it in
but
there. We did it
somewhere
anyway
in
because
there.
it's
Yeah,
necessary.
exactly.
Absolutely.
Thank you for that.
Sure.
Is there another question?
Thanks, Mayor Fuller. Go ahead, Rajiv.
Officially welcome.
Thank you.
It's been very nice already having the chance to work with you. I would ask you to think of the school committee as being there to make sure you have the support you need, that you're successful, pretty much in line with how we work with Dr. Nolan. So please don't hesitate to reach out to us. You're going to quickly figure out the lay of the land in terms of what school committee members are looking for in terms of updates. And I would just bring one up, which I had brought up previously, in terms of the DEI initiatives we have in place. I would love to see retention data, attrition data for employees who we have actively sought to recruit and bring on board.
That's very important.
And I think we've had some difficulty getting that previously, but again, that breakdown would be important because we're putting time, effort, and resources into hiring a diverse group of educators. We need to make sure those efforts are actually working. So
I agree. Absolutely.
Thanks, Rajiv. Go ahead on Ping.
Welcome, and we're happy to have you being here. I'd like to echo Rajiv's input that, we said many times at the school committee that we need to make really tremendous efforts to recruit, diversify the staff. And Newton has been challenged for past probably decades with the expansion of so-called minority students, and this is very critical. And I appreciate that. We will give all the support if you need. And quickly also, I apologize if I missed that. Could you say a few things about your background history? I probably missed that in the summer if you already share with my colleagues, but also for public.
Sure.
So,
No, that's okay. So I am a former educator, middle school math teacher, and principal, and human resources director in several different districts. This is probably the biggest district. So I've had experience in human resources thanks to a superintendent who wanted to diversify her cabinet and did not have someone who had been a principal on the cabinet before. And so she offered me a position as a human resources director to help, this was in Fall River, to help usher us out of restructuring in human resources and 3 other areas: finances, teaching and learning, and governance. And so there started my experience in taking a leap, because I didn't even know what FMLA was at the time. I'm like, why do you want me? But the idea was that somebody on the other side of that phone knew the walk of the principal and could support the building level work, as well as be that voice at the table. And so I loved the experience. It was great. I did want to pursue my doctorate, so I went back to school, and I went back into a school while I was doing that because of where my focus was. And that was a great experience in Worcester with the Elm Park Community School that was in level 4, and we needed to turn things around. wonderful work. I love working with children, and I've considered myself super lucky to be able to seamlessly go from the building level into central office and back again, depending on what the position was and what was going on in my life at the time. And I left that position and went back into human resources on the Cape in Falmouth. Very different experience, very small. It was the Cape. I have Caribbean blood in me. I thought it was going to be great. Nobody said it's gray for 9 months. but the people there definitely bring out the sunshine and bring out the love. And so those 6 years, it came and went in what seemed like a blink, but it included the pandemic, and it included really hard, difficult times just personally for me. And so when I took my time to look at what would be next, and I researched the superintendents, and I researched the districts, and 5 stars all the way around for Newton and for Dr. Nolan in terms of why I do this work, why I'm invested in supporting other administrators, why I'm invested in working with principals and with schools. Today I thought I might be lucky enough to go and sub in a 3rd grade classroom. Didn't happen, but I was excited about it. But I think it's the right time for me to be in Newton, and it's the right time for Newton to be my employer, part of my life. And so I'm looking forward to working with the school committee, with Dr. Nolan, with my colleagues, and all of the schools. I hope that gave you enough of
Thank you very much. Very nice, well-rounded introduction. Thanks.
Thank you, Wan Peng. All right. Well, I don't think we can close it out any better than you just did, which is that
let's
you're
go
the
home.
right person for Newton, and Newton is very pleased and lucky and proud to have you under its employment. So thank you very much.
One shout out to the whole HR department. I came in and they have been amazing. They have been lovely. They've been supportive. They have cranked it out while they're teaching me about how we do things in Newton. They're amazing. That has to be said.
Outstanding. So this is the busiest time for HR, summer and now. So Dr. Santa's entry plan expected around the beginning of December so that she could have time to get everybody onboarded.
We look forward to it. Thank you. All right. Continuing on, we have an overview and discussion and vote of policy IGD, our curriculum adoption of the new elementary reading literacy curriculum.
So last spring, I watched you all online while you had a very deep and detailed presentation from Dr. Renee McCall, our Assistant Superintendent for Teaching and Learning, and her team about the adoption of the EL literacy curriculum, which, by the way, today, woohoo, is the first day of that training for our teachers, all buzzing around the building. Really wonderful day. So you have a policy in your Newton policy handbook, which is policy IGD, curriculum adoption, and that policy indicates that the school committee will rely on its professional staff to make a decision about designing an instructional program, what are the courses of study and the goals, and that I have the authority to approve new programs and courses of study after they've been studied by our team. But you will consider and officially adopt any program and course when it constitutes a significant alteration in instructional content or approach. The EL literacy curriculum is both. So I am asking for you to hearken back to that over 1.5 hour conversation you already had, and the link to which the slide deck is here. Dr. McCall is here if you have any lingering questions. But that meeting was extremely comprehensive, and I'm asking you to support with an official vote the deployment of that curriculum, which you gave tacit approval to in that meeting, but you need an official vote per your policy handbook.
Thank you, Anna. So I will say that this, on this particular issue, least of all anyone might call me on the fact that we're not doing an official first read. If we treat our discussions lengthy as they were last spring as the first read on this is just a mere formality. So questions, comments, but I think we'll take a vote tonight. Go ahead, Chris.
Just one very quick comment, or I guess request. this was this whole process was something that there was a lot of people in the community very engaged with, and it was sort of a not just in Newton, but across the country has taken on a little bit of its life of its own. So can I just encourage that we, as we go through the rollout of this and the sort of early evaluation, whatever, that we sort of be very transparent and put things out there, whether we just publish something on the website, send out emails, reports at meetings, anything, just to make sure that we're letting the community know how this is rolling out and going.
You got it.
Thank you.
Good point. Thank you, Chris. Any others? Questions, comments, motion? Do we have a motion to approve the curriculum adoption?
Sure, I move to approve the curriculum adoption.
Thank you, Cove. Do we have a second on that? Thank you, Chris. We'll do a roll call vote. Ward 1?
Yes.
Ward 2?
Yes.
Ward 3?
Yes.
Ward 4? Yes. Ward 5?
Yes.
Ward 6 is not present. Ward 7 not present. Ward 8?
Yes.
And Mayor Fuller?
Yes.
All right, that motion passes unanimously. We have crossed an I and dotted a T. I appreciate that. All right, up next, we have a discussion of our FY24 system-wide goals, work that we started over the summer.
Just by way of framing, introduction, and for the public, this is a document that has been workshopped through 2 retreats with the school committee and retreats with the administrative team, which includes all of central office staff and principals. It is aligned to the work of the school improvement plans that were written in draft form by all of the principals in the spring. And once you give us the go-ahead here, I'll come back to you with a certification that the school improvement plans are therefore aligned to this document. It starts with, just on page 1, just starting to get the community and everyone ready for a longer range strategic plan, which would be a 3 to 5 year plan in process, which would mean it would have different phases of implementation. I'll just give you an example. So we'll use the EL curriculum as a way to do this. There was an audit by the Teaching and Learning Office of what are we doing in our current reality for literacy, and that would be under sort of mapping and auditing what we're doing. Then there was identification of potential pilots to try or strategies to try that they wanted to choose a new movement in literacy. Then there was budgeting and some initial plans made. Now we're doing those initial trainings. So this year, I just want to say, we're not going to be able to measure changes in reading progress based on the new curriculum. This will be the first year that we go through it. We can certainly compare reading last year to this year, but we won't know the true impact of the reading curriculum immediately at the end of this year. So I say that to you because we'll do some baseline assessments, and then we'll report and reflect on that to you, and then we will restart that cycle to continue to look at what we're doing. So just trying to get you all in the understanding of how we lead those pieces. And then we might do some more planning phases, execute more training, complete activities. So this year we might bring you logs of those activities. We might bring you the professional development agendas, feedback from the staff, those types of things. Of course, regular updates, or you can get it all in one chunk, however the committee likes. And then we'll assess what are the early indicators of success or needs for revision, and then we'll assess that again and revise or augment our efforts. So just this is how we'll sort of roll on all of these goals this year. And I would say to you that considering there's some newness among our team, there's a lot of new things happening in the district, we're very much in a lot of mapping, audit, and identification within this set of draft goals that I am putting before you. So I'll leave it at that, and I know that the committee has digested these on numerous occasions, so I look forward to any feedback that you have for me and the team on this.
Thanks, Anna. Feedback and or questions or comments for Anna and the team? Go ahead, Emily.
First of all, wow. I just want to put that out there. It's very detailed, it's comprehensive. I like the success measurements that are in there. And just wow. It's very ambitious, and I think it's a great first step in a longer, broader journey. And the question I had was, how do you anticipate, or when the sort of milestones along the way that school committee will be getting updates as well as the public?
I actually have this in our calendar that is coming up later, but I can tell you now, spoiler alert. Hold on, let me find it. There'll be two updates, and then there'll be the May updates where you will simultaneously evaluate this and me in your role as my evaluator. So there's sort of, I think there'll be 4 public meeting points. Thanks. I do have it right here with all my chicken scratch on it. Thank you. So the first is on December 4th. So we'll just do an update. I've also backed Dr. Santa's Human Resources entry plan there, as well as Dr. Hogue coming in to give you an overview of the data dashboard and design. So whenever the agenda items speak squarely to the strategic plan, I will label it as such so that you can kind of play strategic plan bingo, and you can say like, oop, check, we've already heard that, we've already heard that. So that's the first time that you'll hear. The second time that you will hear will be throughout the month of January, where you'll hear an update on the profile of a graduate and the strategic planning, which there's a lot of overlap there. Then some official times where you'll, May 6th, May 20th, June 10th, and June 24th.
Any other questions on?
Thank you.
Thank you. Other members, go ahead on Ping.
Well, certainly will take a little bit of time to understand fully the plan, but still, as Emily said, wow, it's ambitious. Here, I'm just looking at a little bit specific, page 3, success measures. As you probably recall, and I mentioned that when we did the interview, mentioned that the identification of data sets the district will use to monitor changes to students' mental health and well-being in future years. And I know that in Natick, you guys already did something that was really impressive. And plus the last one, implementation of common social-emotional learning screeners, K-5 and 6 to 8. I know still it's early at this moment, but I'm just a little bit anxious to see what kind of things will be involved and the process, or probably need some resources to help. So just something to, so I can think a little bit more when I talk to people and try to understand these efforts and as measures.
So the district contracted with Panorama Education, which has a social emotional screener in it, that will give us actionable data around key competencies under the CASTLE framework, which is really the gold standard of social emotional learning education. And it asks, self-management is one strand, for example. So under that, each student will have more granular information about their own perceptions of self-management. Now, there are other ways in Panorama for future consideration to triangulate that with both a teacher and a parent testimonial as well. So we did beta test that in Natick for a while. It wasn't all that it was cracked up to be, but we do, they keep refining their work every year, and it comes with a very robust data dashboard of how our students doing. And then we, as a governance body, and the team as a an instructional leadership body, can look at that and say, okay, so if these are the trends within our students' performance, what are the resources that are needed? And I, of course, will bring that to you as we think about budgets and we think about deploying supports for those young people.
And eventually there will be some kind of data, some kind of quantitative information to be shared with parents? Just curious.
That I would need to just check what the plan is. Usually when you do the first year of a screener, we have to digest how good it was before we're sharing it out there. But my experience has been we have shared with families what their students' results were.
Thanks, on Ping. Other questions or comments? Great. I know we're all excited to play strategic planning bingo. That sounds like a great game. And it's been said that our district is a slow-moving, slow-turning freighter, but I can't help but feel that right now it seems like we're just really accelerating in a lot of the things that this committee has been asking for in terms of measurement and data sets, and it feels really exciting. So I appreciate this, and thank you very much. All right, let's continue on.
Can I make one
Sure, of
request, Madam
course.
Chair? So if there's anything of concern that you still need addressed, I mean, I'd very much like to ask for your vote of approval for this in the next meeting, so that I can then certify the school improvement plan's alignment with it. And then, of course, teachers set goals from that after that. So I just want to make sure that if there's anything outstanding of concern, please reach out to me, and I'm happy to have a chat with you about that, and we'll present our conversation to this meeting next time.
Resource Officer Memorandum of Understanding. Throwing it to you, Anna.
Sure. There's two parts to this update. One is just simply the Memorandum of Understanding, which is an MOU between the school superintendent and the police chief. It is identical to the MOU that you all reviewed last year. I have made no changes. It is in alignment with the state template and the best practices, and I would say has a special Newton flair to it that I'm learning, and it's very strong. And the relationship with our school resource officers is also strong, and I'm looking forward. I've met with Acting Chief Maines, but I'm looking forward to some time with Chief Carmichael in the future. So this is no change of an MOU, but I have to re-sign it and send it every year. Instituted this summer for the first time, though, is the second part of the memo that you have with you, which is the School Resource Officer Program Reporting per DESI's mandate. That state law, which went into effect, and I linked for you to review there, requires data collection and reporting to the SRO about the SRO program, and then I am required to report it to you. So here I am reporting it. So what it asks me to report to you is the cost of the school district having a school resource officer. That cost to us is zero because the school resource officers are paid out of the City of Newton accounts for MPS, and the cost of all of the school resource officers is $429,635 in salary. And so the second request for reporting is a description of what we spend on mental, social, or emotional health support for personnel for the school, and SEL salaries paid out of our operating accounts. And so that is $10 million, roughly. So $10,011,252. And social emotional learning salaries paid out of our grants account, which totaled $95,100, for a grand total of salaries budgeted for FY23 of $10,106,352. So that was for FY23. Third, it asks us to document and report publicly any school-based arrests, citations, court referrals made in the previous year, disaggregated as required by the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education. So this is a place where we had some conversations today because the data is not actually easily disaggregated in the manner that it is currently constituted. So we have a plan for how to do that moving forward. If someone were to just make requests through the police for these records, they're juveniles, so you can't get those. So it's a weird process. But we've made a way to do that moving forward. And this is a story that has had to happen among many districts and their city counterparts in the police department. But just so everyone understands, there were 0 arrests in the Newton Public Schools last year. There were 14 cases which result in a summons before juvenile court. That may or may not be a school-related matter. So just so people know. And most of those cases are diverted at that level. So diversion is the police and school and courts' expectation that education for young people is better than punishment in the law in terms of police action. So diversion is an education program that helps students to avoid other offenses being charged to their record. There were 4 marijuana citations issued, and 53 cases resolved through other means, so referrals to counselors, to services, and to other state agencies. So we should know that our youth officers assisted over 400 different individual reports involving students enrolled in NPS last year that may or may not have been in school time. That may have been and is more likely out in the community when the supports that the school provide are not so readily available to young people. Our SRO partners can be an extension of that NPS family and also do their own good community work and policing within the community. So for example, if there's an issue within the neighborhood, the child might be referred to the police for an issue, but with an SRO in place in the department, we want those relationships to be first and front line in terms of the officer consulting, supporting, coaching, checking on the welfare of our children, and just building relationships. So that is the report that we need to give to the community related to our SROs. And I ask, of course, for your support on the MOU. I don't need a vote, but just your support, because it's important that our police partners work with us effectively for our kids.
Thank you. Any questions or comments on this? So something that I've heard from parents, kind of going back to before I became a school committee member, was a deep concern about the training of our school resource officers, specific to anti-bias, cultural competency training, and really making sure that that was something we were continuously advocating for. So I know that that's under the Newton Police Department, their auspices, but it sure would be wonderful to be able to get a window into what that training might entail.
I can certainly bring you an overview of the trainings for the SROs, but they also participate in the trainings with the staff at the school. So whenever those trainings occur, they have access to those as well.
Great. Mayor Fuller, go ahead.
And if I can build on that, in addition, not only does NPD do a lot of anti-bias training, the SROs by state law also have to have specific anti-bias training. And if you would ever like to have Chief Carmichael join us to describe it in detail, I'm sure he would be more than pleased.
That might be right for one of those forum topics at some point. Thank you, Mayor Fuller. Appreciate that.
Well, to that point, perhaps just an overview on school safety in general would be a forum. I think those are best served in a time of peace, not in reaction to a situation. So I would vote for a forum on that, just so families can know how we do our business there. Maybe that would be a good time for a 2-for-1.
Absolutely.
Okay. Putting it on the calendar.
All right. And that might be, oh no, I thought we had a wonderful segue, but we don't. We have we have a bit of a break. We have our next update is regarding the Family Aid Facility proposal to rehabilitate 42 units of transitional housing for families experiencing homelessness. Here we have that detailed memo from Casey Miller and Katie Hogue, Casey, our Assistant Superintendent of Student Services, and Katie, our Chief of Data and Research. That's my first time saying that new title for you there, Katie. Welcome.
Okay. Oh. And we also have a guest from Family Aid. I don't know if you want to
If I can just introduce him, we have Newton resident and also Family Aid CEO Larry Siemens on.
Hi, Larry.
So Superintendent Miller is our liaison here. While certainly the mayor and I are involved, Casey is our person who's making sure that all the details are occurring. And Katie, of course, is tracking the impact. So welcome to all of you. And Casey, I don't know if you just want to give a brief overview of the information here. And then if anyone has any questions about the memo that's written here, which for the benefit of the public is a description of this project and its potential impact. And then also we're seeking a recommendation from the committee around buffer zone recommendation. And I'll have Katie say a few words about that shortly.
Great. So thank you, Dr. Nolan. You mentioned the background. So essentially, Mayor Fuller had announced this summer that 1650 Washington Street, which was previously a nursing home, will be renovated, or at least proposed to be renovated, into a 42-unit shelter for families. we are, so Family Aid is a nonprofit agency that's been identified to oversee this work. We've had a few meetings with partners over on the city side to discuss a number of things to prepare the site for the arrival of these families, which we're looking at a February start date, February to March. I'm sure Larry can speak a little bit more if there are questions about the property itself and the plans. When Katie speaks, she'll talk a little bit more about the number of students that we are expecting based on trends that Family Aid has seen in some similar spaces in some surrounding towns. One other thing I do want to add is that we are partnering with DESE, of course, on this, and there is some funding for cities and towns that host shelters and districts that host these families. So one is that they're for every day that a student from this shelter attends school, the district receives about $100. And then there is also emergency support funding from DESE, which is about $1,000 for every homeless student enrolled in our district in the shelter, and it's more to address immediate needs such as laptops, hotspots, clothing, and other supports determined by the district. We do have, I found out through conversations with Larry, is that we do have some pretty generous donors who I believe are also residents who have donated some laptops and other electronics already or will be for these families moving in, which is a great start.
I also just want to add that there's been reach outs from churches to my office, just people overwhelmingly supportive of these families who are moving in. And it's just been a really bright spot in terms of supporting these students who are in transition. And of course, McKinney-Vento allows some students, especially secondary students tend to do this, to be bused back to their home location. So you get reports on McKinney-Vento now, so those students would be included in those results. So, but we're all used to that routine. This is a new facility, so we just wanted the public to be aware of it. And also about the Zoom call.
Yeah, you read my mind. So this Thursday night, we will actually have a community meeting via Zoom where all of the partners will actually be represented, including NPS, a number of city offices, Family Aid. DESE will be there also to answer questions that the community will have. Folks may recall that there was a similar forum that was held also via Zoom, months ago at this point for Hotel Indigo, what would have been.
I don't know if you wanted Larry to say anything else, or?
I think he's here to answer questions, but I'm sure he would.
Katie, would you like to explain the buffer zone recommendation?
Sure. So Family Aid provided us with projections of the students that they anticipate will reside in this facility based on residents in some of their facilities in other locations in Massachusetts. So based on these projections, they are projecting between 9 and 16 school-aged children to be living in this facility. The facility is located in the Pierce Day North District, and we are recommending that we expand the existing Pierce Williams, Day Brown, the existing Pierce Williams, Day Brown, and North-South buffer zone to allow us with some flexibility for student enrollment should the projections or the number of students who enroll change from these projections.
And I also just want to add, as we're talking about flexibility with the buffer zones, is that what we have learned is that oftentimes the shelters will receive about 24 hours notice before families move in. And so we really want to be ready with all of our systems and structures that we have in place.
Great, thank you. Go ahead, Chris.
Thanks. So I have two questions. One sort of very acute about the buffer zones, and then one much bigger question. So is a reasonable expectation that Williams and Pierce will be sufficient to handle, any probable circumstances, or do we want to include, you know, Ainger or Burr, you know, just thinking of the two next most contiguous districts, just to provide maximum flexibility, and then we don't have to go back and, you know, be in a crisis and say, oh, we need to, you know, redo this buffer zone thing. So that's one question. And then the second question I have, which I guess is probably more a question for the mayor than anyone else, just as, you know, there was an article in the Globe about, you know, municipalities, but mostly Western Massachusetts, actually kind of, you know, really struggling with homelessness and you know, overwhelming city services and schools being one piece of that. Obviously, that's you know, a big issue in New York and other places in the country. Is, you know, I guess what should be our reasonable expectation here in Newton? Like, how do we see around the corner on this one? I'm not sure there's an answer to that, but you know, how do we make sure we're doing what we need to do to plan for, you know, that you know, whole universe of possibilities?
I'll give a couple of thoughts, but I welcome Larry or Casey to join me and build on anything. We couldn't be in a better situation here in September 2023. The former Chetwynd property is in a wonderful location. It is, in my estimation, of a reasonable size. We have a top-notch, experienced provider led by a thoughtful, experienced CEO that also happens to be a Newtonian. Larry and his team have been working really well with, I think, our NPS folks as well as our Health and Human Services folks, police, fire, inspectional services. So it's a very different situation in some cities or towns. The state is in a bit of a crisis when it comes to sheltering. Our right to shelter state is for families. It's if you're a single male, you don't have a right to shelter. Our families coming here do. And in some situations now, the state is taking over hotels, and they're at such a crisis point, they're taking over the entire hotel, filling up the hotel, and don't have a service provider available. They've just reached that crisis point in the last weeks. In a weird way, the Indigo being, as it turns out, uninhabitable without a lot of dollar investment means I think we're very unlikely in Newton to have that situation, which would make me very uncomfortable to not have a service provider when lots of families who have had a lot of trauma, I suspect, getting to Massachusetts arrive. So do I imagine in the coming months or years that there might be other facilities or buildings that get explored for similar types of things? Maybe. I'm certainly keeping my ears close to the ground. As long as we have a fabulous service provider, I'm very confident that the Newton community will be a wonderful place to raise children for the temporary means a year or two for a child in this type of situation, that we can be supportive and welcoming. I'm certainly watching all the state actions very closely, and will certainly be very transparent with Newtonians as things possibly bubble up. Hope that helps a little bit, but I don't know if Casey or Larry, one or the other or both, might want to add on.
Yeah, thank you. I do have a few pieces to add on. luckily for us, we had practice with with Hotel Indigo, where we met every week, and internally we pulled in a team of representatives from different departments. So we had the English language learner office, Regina from transportation, certainly student services. We also increased the FTE for our McKinney-Vento coordinator, knowing that we would have an increase. At least we were prepared for Indigo, and then when we heard that there was this project too, it was great so that she can devote all of her time now, increased FTE, on supporting these families, liaising with DCF, DESE, our own transportation department, and then of course speaking with the families too. In working with Larry from Family Aid, we already have a ton of information in terms of what to expect from linguistic to cultural needs of the families, especially the migrant families coming in. So the mental health providers at the schools are prepared. I'm in constant contact with Allison Levitt, Director of ELL Programming, so she's also prepared so that her folks are prepared for the Haitian Creole speaking families. Also, I think you mentioned this, Mayor, but Family Aid has also been in communication with a early childhood provider, a private provider whose name I'm forgetting at the moment.
Family Access, who many of us are familiar with.
Just for spacing, training sites, and other supports too, which has been helpful for us, because if these families stay 1 or more years, then that bubble will come into NECP and then the elementary school. So I feel pretty confident in terms of preparation, and the numbers, while you know, they can range a bit from 9 to 16, but spread across 2, potentially 4 elementary schools is doable. And of course, are consistently checking the numbers with Katie.
All set? I just wondered, Larry, would you like to add anything?
Sure. Yes, thank you, Mayor, and thank you to the committee as well for time to discuss the project. I also want to say that I'm a proud Newton Public Schools parent as well. I had my 2 sons graduated in 2012 and 2017, and appreciated the great education they had here. So very quickly, I think to your question, committee member, about kind of the difference in what's happening in the community, just to echo, Family Aid has been around for over 100 years. We've had a lot of experience working with a variety of families who are finding themselves in a crisis with either housing instability or homelessness. I think the difference for Newton and for Family Aid is that we're able to respond to the current crisis with a very experienced group of staff, and I think a model that actually will help elevate families and help them move more quickly out of their crisis into permanent housing, which will most likely be elsewhere. So most of our families who come to us are with us on an average about 11 months. We expect families who are in their process of seeking permanency in the United States, that's probably going to be more like 24 months. So the families will be with us. We know that they're younger children. But the facility itself and Families Aid approach is a little bit different than what you're reading in the newspapers. So the crisis Mayor Fuller mentioned was families in hotels without services. The Chetwynd property actually allows us 1/3 of the space will be dedicated to on-site educational and supplemental programs to support both the children and the parents. That's the Family Aid way of doing things. That's a little bit different than what you're reading about. So we have established partnerships throughout the greater Boston area to provide on-site supports for both the children and the parents. We have a great relationship with an organization called School on Wheels that brings tutoring programs to kids on site. We think that would be a great supplement for the children who are of elementary and secondary education. Again, we expect about 9 to 16 students based on what we're seeing across our shelters. We have 135 shelter units around the community. We have a similar focused on educational program in Brookline. So we have about 4 students in the Brookline Public Schools at a 35-unit family navigation center right in Coolidge Corner. You wouldn't know it if you went by it. It's a very quiet place. So we feel like we have the practice and the expertise really to make sure that the families are well cared for while they're with us for a short period of time. So hopefully that answers some of your questions. And again, a little bit of a different response than what you may be reading about in the papers. That's certainly not a hotel. Family members come in, they're enrolled in a program. Parents must be working towards self-sufficiency. We track them on 6 determinants of health, social health, that help them to move along while we're making sure kids are getting the supports they need as well. And we also bring in, I think Casey had mentioned, we have deep philanthropic roots. Many donors to Family Aid over the last 100 years are from Newton. We were founded by a Newtonian. And so we have additional resources that we'll bring to bear to help the children and parents who are in West Newton. So hopefully that gives you a little background on us. I'm glad to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you, Larry, Mayor Fuller, and Casey for that combined response. Chris, are you all set?
Yeah, thank you. Very helpful context.
Great,
Appreciate
thank you. Go ahead, Rajiv, and then Emily.
Thank you, Larry. That was really helpful. I have two questions. One is around social emotional support. So the memo was very detailed. Thank you, Casey. And it does bring up the question of the challenges some of these students have faced or are facing, actually, and ensuring that those supports are in place, especially for those who will be attending Newton Public Schools for some period of time. So I'd certainly ask that we look at what those supports need to be. Our guidance counselors, our adjustment counselors, our social workers are experiencing higher caseloads. And my point here is not to say anything other than we need to understand what needs to be in place to support these students, and then work to put those supports in place. So that's one point. The other is very tactical, just knowing the location and having driven past it many times. It's a little separate from the rest of Newton. So is there any thinking around trying to have some level of community integration, again, which is going to benefit the students in NPS, because otherwise it becomes potentially this little enclave that's not connected to everything else that's going on, that doesn't let the students experience the social connections that we want them to while they're in NPS. So just those two things.
Yeah, helpful. Thank you.
Thank you very much, committee member. Very quickly for a response, if you're looking for a response, again, a little bit of the difference in our efforts. Every family who comes to our programs, so the program in West Newton, are enrolled in a program that includes a licensed social worker and a housing specialist that will work on assessing the family's needs, social emotional needs, employment needs, other educational needs that the family may have, health and wellness programs. So that's part of the work that we would do. And then working in tandem with the parent to have consent to share that information with the school district so that we can appropriately work together to make sure that children's needs are being met. So that's part of the process that we use in our programs that we continue to do here in Newton. And thank you very much for the notice of the site. You're right, it's a really lovely site. It's got 2 acres of land. We're hoping to put in a playground for young children so that services can be there for families. And we've begun outreach to a variety of different neighbors and community organizations to make sure that the children who are there also have activities and connections through the Newton West Suburban Y and other types of programs. Family Access, which is right down the block from us. We've talked with them about programming as well to make sure that kids and parents have an opportunity to integrate into the community as well. So that's our intention and plan right now.
Thank you. Thanks, Rajiv.
If I can also just add, Dr. Nolan mentioned how many organizations have reached out to her. Ditto for me. There's been this lovely, so many different organizations. We'll try our darndest to make those wonderful connections and surround these families with a big warm hug.
Great, thank you. Go ahead, Emily.
I'll be super fast. First is the point that I'm happy to see the buffer zones and the changes in the buffer zones working the way that they should be, and one of the reasons why we use them and we have them in Newton, so this is great. I have a question about NECP. I always have a question about NECP. And I know and understand it's very hard for us to project what the impact may possibly be on NECP. I have no sense about what the enrollment is because, it's the 5th day of school. And so are they set up to handle that potential increase in enrollment? It's not going to huge, but I'm just curious, just making sure that at least that portion, because we haven't talked about it yet.
Yeah, that's a good question. From my understanding, based on looking at the enrollment numbers, we are prepared. Again, not knowing the unknown, I can't speak to that. But speaking with Kathleen Browning, we should be okay. Thank you.
Thanks, Emily. Any other questions or comments? We are being asked for a vote on this at our next, or the buffer zone piece that is, in our next school committee meeting. Any other questions, thoughts?
I would just join us Thursday night. I think the Zoom starts at 7. DESI will be there, DHCD, although they're not called DHCD anymore, but DHCD will be there. I think Ed Augustus might even be joining us, the Secretary of Housing. And we will stay as long as there's a question. Come with any questions, concerns, issues, thoughts. Larry and his team will be there, so.
Mayor Fuller, I had a question from the community today asking, could they submit questions in advance and to whom?
Send them along to me or Barney Heath, and we'll make sure that we get them addressed. Absolutely.
Okay.
No problem.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Casey. Thank you, Katie, and thank you, Larry. We very much appreciate all of your good work on this, and we know that these families are in really excellent hands. So thank you. Okay, Casey's staying right there. We are turning now to our Disability Awareness UOD and an overview of Student Services Working Group.
So thank you, Madam Chair, for the opportunity to speak on this, which is really just a recap of a meeting that Mayor Fuller and I took with the Understanding Our Differences Board. And I just want to be really clear that we honor the contribution of this group. 40 years is a long time, very forward-thinking, very important group in the community who has really just done a tremendous service to generations of young people learning about students with disabilities. None of the value of that is diminished by conceiving of a next generation partnership for us with this group. So we don't know what that is yet. I do know that I am in conversation with the group now. They have shared their curriculum with me because I'm the new girl and I haven't seen any of it, so I'm looking at that now. And also, we talked about the things that are listed here. None of them are happening at this time. I am going to the board meeting for Understanding Our Differences this month, September 19th, to have ongoing conversations. I shared it because I want to just make sure that the community knows that while the old way of collaborating with Understanding Our Differences is not occurring, there may be a next generation partnership that could be even stronger, that could be much modernized, that could be benefiting students today in a whole new way, and I look forward to exploring that. In the meantime, Ms. Nicole Miller is working with her staff, and I just wanted to give her the opportunity to say what that is, because first of all, she gave this very rousing workshop that I participated in around her vision for the department and how we support students with special needs, and her vision for how we might take the next steps in disability awareness and really moving our district to a more progressive place. So I was very inspired by the work that you did this summer, and I just want to give you an opportunity to talk about it here. Nothing is a replacement for the historical work of Understanding Our Differences, but it is our job to adapt to our current students and the current landscape for research and supporting students with special needs, and I think we can do it all. I think we can have good partnerships and continue to refresh our programs.
Agreed. Thank you. So this is very much looking at the footprint that the district, led by the DEI department, has done over the last few years in terms of the anti-racist work that the district has taken on. In June, when I presented my entry plan findings, I coupled the presentation with also an overview of the work that the student services administrators did. There are about 30 of us. Where we met regularly every 2 weeks all of last year to really tackle and wrestle with this idea of where ableism exists. So when we talked about anti-bias training earlier, similarly in thinking about how do we bring our staff, take them even further along this journey of being an anti-biased district, anti-ableist district, and so beginning to wrestle with the ideas of how do we celebrate neurodiversity in every classroom? How do we ensure that any barriers that are set up that prevent every student from coming in and receiving a meaningful education where they can authentically be themselves, how do we identify those barriers and break them down? And this is, I said this in June too, and I'll continue to say it, is Newton is poised to do this work. I don't think any district across the Commonwealth has done this before. And the idea here is, yes, universal design for learning, but really at the heart of this is how do we create a learning environment, create the conditions for our teachers to be able to recognize every part of our students' identity, whatever they bring to us. And that's where we see the work of student services. So it's a big piece of work where we're changing mindsets, we're changing culture. And so we broke it down into, and this is the work that Dr. Nolan mentioned this summer, that we had a group of us, and hopefully the groups will expand as we look further into the fall, into more concrete pieces of the work. One is the work that central staff will do, which is embedding these ideals, embedding these beliefs into all of our work. So with the rollout of the new literacy curriculum, how do we ensure that the instructional moves speak to anti-ableism, the DEI work to include disability as an identity. As student services administrators, we met today for our kickoff meeting for the year. I will run the group through what's called the SWOT analysis. We'll use DESI's templates. And so SWOT, S-W-O-T, stands for strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. And so we will break down probably by level. So NECP and so early ed and elementary, middle, and then high school and postgraduate programs, and begin looking at the 3 Ps, our policies, practices, and protocols, and really digging into where ableism exists. And then at the end of which, we will present to the superintendent a list of recommendations for changes. It's a multi-year project, but we hope to really kick it off strong this first year. The second piece of this work is what we're calling program development. So there's a working group led by Maria Colby, who presented a bit on our SEL programming in our elementary schools. I believe it was in May or June with Jesse Krodik. So Maria's leading the program development working group. We will have folks from CPAC. We have a parent on right now. We will be asking for educators to volunteer in this group soon. We want folks who identify as neurodiverse, so that we have folks who are coming with lived experiences. And we will develop a scope and sequence, a curriculum that right now we're thinking will be probably thematic based, so and developmentally appropriate for the age groups. So we're thinking an example, and this is not set in stone, but one thing that we talked about when we met over the summer is in kindergarten, the theme is how we play. So it doesn't matter the label you have. The idea is that we all play differently. Then it moves on to how we learn. We all learn differently. We all listen differently. One of the examples that we talked about is I may look you in the eye to indicate that I'm listening, but another learner may not do that, but they're listening as actively as I am when I'm looking you in the eye, and that's okay. And so how do we embed that into our existing lessons to cover this philosophy that we accept you, every part of your identity. So that's the working group piece. Timeline of that right now is we're trying to add more seats to the table, widen the circle, and have more folks join us internally, and community members also, meaning parents and other organizations. Again, Maria's going to be leading that group. So we will have more folks coming and more of an update, but we will meet regularly until the end of the calendar year with something to present publicly following that.
And I just want to say, our current negotiations moment hampers an effort like this. So both on the parent side and on the teacher side, and I say that without judgment. I understand everybody's doing the advocacy that they think they need to do, but Casey could not accelerate the work this summer because it relied on volunteerism. And also, you know, there are parents who are supporting our teachers in that same non-volunteering. So we will move ahead as soon as we can and as fast as we can. One piece that's been come up a few times about, well, you know, you took away understanding our differences and now there's nothing. So that is not the case, and I want to say first and foremost, our new EL curriculum in literacy also has a human rights, empathy-based curriculum, which is a delicious companion to the work that we already do. The social emotional lessons that happen in morning meetings already lays the tracks for these kinds of situations. I myself observed a class this week where a teacher was teaching actively about students with particular needs in the classroom. So it's not like we took away everything that ever helps students with disabilities acclimate. I think that Mr. Goldmiller is just taking this up a notch, which is what I heard from most of the CPAC parents in my entry planning meeting, that the mindset needs to shift so that students are not pathologized and there's like a lesson to deal with the student. Rather, we prime the environment and the planning so that all students are included and able to talk about who they are and be who they are in the environment. So CPAC has spoken passionately about that, so we're full throttle to get that done.
Great. Any questions or comments? Go ahead, Rajiv.
A few comments. One is that I don't think you should consider the CPAC to be monolithic in terms of their perspective on this. They're certainly not.
Certainly, yep.
And I think we run the risk of taking it as such if you're hearing from various people about ableism versus non-ableism. And I would urge you to look at multiple perspectives and talk to multiple perspectives. I'm not sure that's happened, actually. I've heard that it hasn't, but I know you're new, certainly. Casey, maybe not that new, but I would urge you to talk to a variety of people within the parents of children with disabilities and hear from them and see what they have to say. UOD was killed, at least in Newton. The last time I asked Kathy Smith about this, she said it's gone. I don't think that's necessarily changed. I don't see anything that's replaced it right now. What Casey laid out is an ambitious plan, but even getting the plan done is not going to happen until the end of this academic year, if that. And then we'd have to put something in place. So I have concerns around that. Do I think morning meeting or the greeting circle takes the place of UOD? No, I don't. It doesn't hurt if it's run the right way and inclusive enough, but it's probably not going to be there. So I see a gap. I would love to see the gap filled with something good and relatively soon, and I'll keep an eye on it. But as of right now, I feel like the gap is certainly there. Also, separately, there was some funding restored specifically for a program this year that would be along the lines of UOD. It didn't have to be UOD, and I would love to hear what we have done with that funding. So it was $37,000. It wasn't a significant amount, but I'd like to make sure that it was actually applied to or is being applied to creating what will take the place of UOD. And I've asked about that as well previously, and I don't think I got a real response, so I'd love to get one.
Okay. So to summarize, you want to understand how that money is being spent, and second, you'd like to know what lessons exist now that could be the bridge before we deploy the newly formed curriculum of the future.
Right. Unless I'm reading this incorrectly, we're some time away from deploying a new curriculum in the future. So yes, I'd love to hear what's happening. The examples that are in the memo all seem to be related to high school. That wasn't where this effort was taking place. So would love to hear more there. And then also the intent of UOD and the discussions around it were not necessarily to make disabled students more comfortable, although that was certainly a part of it, but also to make neurotypical, non-disabled students more comfortable interacting with peers who were neurodivergent or disabled. So that's another aspect I hope will be in the wonderful new curriculum we'll have.
Thanks.
Thank you, Rajiv. So, I think for me, what I'm hearing is staying curious, as Rajiv is curious, and asking thoughtful, detailed questions, but also keeping an open mind. Because something that Anna, that you said earlier that I'd love to elevate, is that you said it's important to have good partnerships, but also to continue to refresh the programs. And I think if that's our true compass and we're following that mindset, we will end up in a good place. I don't know, you've got a very ambitious plan, and it sounds really exciting. It sounds like good stuff that our district should be pursuing. I hear you, Rajiv. I think there are multiple perspectives that should be incorporated into the feedback mechanism, and I trust these folks to do that work through the course of this year as they explore with the working group. Again, we will be voting on this in our next meeting, the buffer zone piece, that is. And I'm sorry, I'm literally morphing. Sorry.
You already did that. Good job. You're ahead of yourself.
Piece.
Yep.
On this one, we're not asked for anything right now.
No, this was just an update because we know how important this is to the community.
Thanks, Rajiv. Good questions. All right. Thank you, Casey. Oh, by the way, question for you. There's a young person in the back. Is that young person attached to you in any
She
respect?
is. It's my younger daughter, Lucia, who
hi,
wanted
Lucia.
to hang out with me tonight.
Very cool. Good to meet you. Thanks, Casey.
Thank you.
All right, so the last item on our planned agenda is a discussion of the FY24 school committee calendar and agenda items, and Anna is seeking input and advice from the school committee regarding our forums this year.
And just some school committee praise, if I might, Madam Chair. We are 100% on track with our timing and goals tonight, even though we started later, so hoorah. So before you is Ms. Mazzola and my attempt to take things from last year, listen to the retreats, and put things on the calendar that everybody said they would like to hear about. Over in the corner, or on the side, on the right-hand side, there were suggestions. Chris wrote me a very detailed memo about suggestions for forums, so the list is there. And I have the memo if anybody wants to see it. I think it was just a good roundup of here are some things that I think we've all said we'd like to see. So there's stuff there. I've already made some mental changes here tonight because, so for example, school safety and an SRO forum of some sort, right? There's a couple other pieces that aren't on here. For example, the calendar decisions. I am unclear, even though we looked at all the meetings and the expectations, where you are with that and where you would like it in the calendar of voting. It seems like a new calendar gets voted in the spring-ish time period, and you have some holiday business to do before that, so we've got to back it up and figure that out. But I wasn't clear if we were actually doing that or not. And so that has to get put on here. So, and anything else that you want to add, knowing that this is a fluid document and we do move things around, I think that's your way, correct? We don't vote this as a permanent thing. It's fluid. Just the dates. Okay, good. So just wanted you to have what was on there so far. I look forward to meeting with you at our docket meetings, and I love the rotation process that you have of getting people involved, and then we'll take everyone's feedback through that meeting.
With regard to the calendar issue, Chris and Anping were on the calendar working group for the holidays, that is. And we were kind of, at the end of that work, we were left kind of without clear guidance. And I think, from my perspective, it would be helpful to have a recommendation from you as our superintendent who's got this vision long term, to set a recommendation for the school committee to consider regarding how we're going to treat those holidays. You have all the data that the work. Yeah, sorry.
That's all right.
You have all the data that the working group did over the course of a year. Anping and Chris can certainly share with you their perspectives as well for you can then bring that information
Okay.
back to the school committee and help us just smooth through a process. Questions, concerns, thoughts from members? Chris, then on thing.
So I did send you
Yep.
some detail. Okay, I just want to make sure you got that, because I
Yes.
think that was when you were overseas.
Yep.
And if I didn't copy you on it, I can send you.
You may
some.
have, but it gives
Send you a lot of
recommendations.
drafts.
Okay. I dig it, don't worry.
Your words, not ours.
Yeah, I just want to, so can I meet with you both together, or do you constitute a
No, that's
quorum? Okay,
Okay.
all right, great.
All right, excellent.
That's
Go ahead,
what I
Anthony.
meant to say. Chris shared very nice, thoughtful, overall, and with data, and really appreciate that. Chris really worked hard on this committee, and I think his thoughts should be carefully, considered, and which represented the most of the members of the committee. Thanks, Chris.
Okay, great, thank you. Go ahead, Emily, yes. Yes, of course. Go ahead. Oh, I see.
This could be a function of Anna's poor handwriting also, so. Poor Lisa's like, could you translate this for me? I don't know what that means.
Emily, make sure you talk in your microphone.
Sorry. Yes, I was just asked, there was a topic that I was unsure of the meaning of, and it's a mystery, and maybe we'll figure it out at some point.
Don't know.
But the one that I wanted to add to this as part of the safety, because I do like the concept of the safety, is possibly something about restorative justice, not just through the DEI work, but sort of what that looks like in real life
Okay.
at all three levels. Tamika's nodding, because I've been suggesting this for the last 4 years. So if we
Okay.
can make it happen, that'd be awesome.
Totally, yep.
I think that's
Great. Oh, my. All right, so, go ahead, Mayor Fuller.
I suspect it's here and I've just missed it, but how we think our way through in an organized fashion on Ward, Underwood, elementary school buildings, and all of that.
We're calling that facilities and long-range planning. So it's in there a couple times. I think that's going to be your spring delight from us.
And there's also a McKibben
Yep,
piece in
McKibben
February.
has been contracted, and we're moving ahead with that. And the same firm that did the assessment of Ward Underwood will now complete the rest of the elementary schools, and the team will put together a recommendation for you of what things, what order, and then you can make some decisions.
Thanks, Anna. Go ahead, Emily.
Just before I forget, Josh Morse would like us to possibly add in October what he referred to as the Uber update on the 4 building projects.
Okay.
Lisa, you've captured that?
Maybe I'll do that the same time he comes for the CIP, the capital improvement plan, then he can have one last night out. Okay, Uber
He doesn't
update.
need one night. He's awake all the time, no.
Oddly enough, he gets up really early in the morning, so if you can put him earlier on the agenda rather than 10 p.m., he'll be
For the
very
couple of
grateful.
hours of sleep he does take.
Exactly.
Okay, we'll do that.
That would be lovely.
All right, so that's everything on our agenda, but I did want to just take a quick temperature check for how everyone thought this meeting went. It was our first in-person attendee meeting. We had a lot of public comment for members of our union, our NTA. So just regarding that for a moment, it was important, but I'm really talking about the functionality of our meeting and how we move through the agenda items here. Did everyone feel like, what did you think? We won't get a chance to talk as a group about this again. Go ahead, Chris.
Better.
Lovely, succinct, I love it.
Don't
Cove,
hold back, Chris. I
lovely
mean-
from Chris,
I
a
think
thumbs
it-
up from Cove. Rajiv,
It
go
helps
ahead.
our goals discussion was a combined 120 hours less than last year.
Yes. Go ahead, Rajiv,
Will
and
be
then I'll
tougher
think.
next year.
Better, so thank you, Anna. Somewhat more efficient, despite all the context and everything else. I thought the memos and material were and continue to be detailed. So there are a lot fewer questions for that reason. It's not a lack of interest. It's really, hey, I understand what's going on here, and I have the level of detail I'm looking for. So thank you for that. And the only other thing that I suggest circling back on is with Lisa in terms of coordination of speakers. I think that's the one challenge with being in a hybrid mode for public comment. And it seemed to go very well today, but I just would want to make sure that we have something good in place that will keep working, because I think we're going to be in this hybrid mode for some time.
Yeah, there's a lot of behind-the-scene juggling, courtesy to our disemboweled voice and to Lisa over there. All right, so go ahead. Oop. Oh dear, sorry, that time of night. Go ahead on
Just
Ping.
logistical, today we start at 7, so, but in the future meeting, still 6:30.
6:30, yes.
Okay, thanks.
Great. Mhm.
You referred to Steve as the disemboweled
Oh
voice.
gosh.
The disembodied voice.
I hear it now. Okay. Apologies, Stephen.
Steve, I hope you're intact.
Apologies, Stephen. Okay, well, it is.
Well, if that's the only brutal thing out of this meeting, then good. All right.
I love that. Thank you for pointing that out. I will watch my words. Anyway, so with that, we have concluded the posted business for tonight's meeting. Our next meeting will be Wednesday, September 27th at 6:30. Among other matters, we will have a long-range planning update, Mayor Fuller, that's that piece we talked about, and an update on the training for the new literacy curriculum. Thank you to Central staff, and a big thanks to everyone who attended tonight, including our first in-person attendees in over 3 years. We very much appreciate it. Our meeting is now adjourned. Thank you.
Could I interview any of you at some point about teacher contract negotiations? I'm sorry, just for some context.